you can talk about your issues and you can do behavioral modification stuff, but there's something that you really got to get at your beliefs and your energetic body and really shift on a spiritual soul level.
If you don't get to the core beliefs, those core issues, then you can talk for 30 years to somebody about it and not change.
I just had someone recently who had a
Yeah.
session with me just one time and was like, my anxiety is almost gone. Like, it's just like, I don't feel anxious anymore. I feel so confident because we did some clearing of some
Yeah.
beliefs and protective parts.
Somebody's pain goes from an 8 to a 2, and like after just releasing 5 or 6 emotions, and then we get it down to a 0. And I talked to him a couple of, days later, pain's still gone.
If we heal on an energetic, spiritual soul level, we heal at all the other levels. Okay. Well, welcome, Michelle. I'm so excited for this conversation to get to know kind of what we do in the healing and kind of energy work and to share our different perspectives of and approaches for how we
Mhm.
do that. Um, so yeah, first let's start with, tell me a little bit more. I know a little bit about you, but I'd love to know more about like the details of what you do and kind of how you came to do what you do.
Okay, well, I'll try to give you the short version of how I came to do what I do. So, I started off as a health and lifestyle coach. And my study started about 25 years ago whenever I was trying to get pregnant and I was having trouble infertility. And the allopathic method wasn't working, or the allopathic path was not working for me. And so I started um, researching nutrition and lifestyle for some weird reason because that wasn't a thing back then, but I've always kind of been an outlier. And I got off the medications that they had me on, the fertility drugs, because they were making me crazy. And I bought a juicer and I got rid of sugar and I started buying organic. And magically, within 3 months, I got pregnant and had a healthy baby girl 9 months later, and she just turned 24. And so that really sparked an interest in me on like how this actually works. And so I started doing deep dives into nutrition and lifestyle, and it was really the things I was looking into were not what people were talking about back then, like GMOs or, aspartame being in your foods and things like that. And so that's how I raised my children. And thankfully my husband was amenable to all these weird things I was doing in the house. But then I realized at some point later on, after I got my nutrition degree and my Master of Science in nutrition and coaching, that there was something missing. And I realized it was the mindset behind it all. And that, although that helped with coaching my clients and helping them, kind of get on like what their big why is, there was still something that was missing. And that's when I started learning about subconscious beliefs and behaviors and habits that are formed from those subconscious beliefs that are really solidified within the first 7 years of life, starting in utero in the third trimester. So um, then I started looking into energy work and how releasing some trapped emotions can actually propel you forward in like no time flat to to the weight loss or to the, finding your purpose or your identity and all that. And then just moving forward in a positive motion. So
Wow. Yeah, that's such a cool story and amazing that you made those changes and then were able to get pregnant. I mean, I hear so much of other people's stories in
mhm.
yours of like struggling with something and being like all the ways that people are telling me, all the things that they're telling me to do aren't working. There's got to be something else and kind of I think it's hard sometimes when we feel like we have to go on our own journey to figure out a solution for ourselves. But then how great that you figured this out and then can help other people so they don't have to do it by themselves.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, I want to hear more about your story too, because I think that you have a very compelling journey that people need to hear about.
Yeah, kind of similar to yours. I heard little bits and pieces of my story in yours. Um, My story kind of starts even younger, like when I was a kid and kind of feeling like I had this sixth sense about people. My mom always said that I was like this old soul. And so I was trying to figure out what to do in college and with my life. I was like, my mom was like, well, maybe try psychology. Like people seem to want to open up to you and talk to you, and you're a good listener and good with people. And I was like, sure, okay. And I loved it. I found it really fascinating. But trying to figure out what to do with that, I think has been the hardest part of my adult life and the biggest part of my journey. I went into marriage and family therapy because I really wanted to help people change their dynamics and their relationships and more on a deeper level. Instead of just giving them resources like I was doing as a case manager when I first started, I wanted to do deeper work. But then I kept feeling like you said, something was missing. And I was like, what is this? Trying different things. And then I went through my own spiritual awakening journey right after I lost someone that I was close to. And it was a really difficult time in my life. And it just kind of like cracked me open
Hmm.
and really changed the course of my life a few years ago. And that's when I discovered the Akashic Records, which is the energetic database of your soul's records and journey, angel healing, energetic work. And I saw that I transformed so much in the 6 months that I was learning that. And I was in a course and I was like, this is it. This lights me up. This is super fascinating. And it's the deeper work that I feel like is missing in the therapy space, where I got really far in my own therapy process as a client. But this part really just took it to a whole nother level. Like you can talk about your issues and you can do behavioral modification stuff, but there's something that you really got to get at your beliefs and your energetic body and really shift on a spiritual soul level. And then that just kind of heals on all the levels. So
I
that's how I do
love that
well.
you say that because, I was in therapy for a long time as well, and that talk therapy is great for, kind of waking you up to and being aware of like what, the triggers are, what, why you're feeling a certain way. But that, like you said, if you don't get to the core beliefs, those core issues, then you can talk for 30 years to somebody about it and not change. And so I think that's where you and I overlap in our approach because there's so many different energetic modalities that can be helpful for people. But finding the one or two that work for you as a bio-individualistic person who has different needs and different, different things that make them tick, um, it's important to find what works for you individually.
Yeah, I feel like there can be such a complementary kind of aspect to this, right? Like the different types of therapy, like somatic work and EMDR, has been helpful. And then I've done some Reiki and some acupuncture, and now Akashic Records and angel healing, and they all kind of come together in homeopath. So it's like you take these little bits and pieces, and I think you need something different on a different parts of your journey. And there might be something that
Exactly.
really resonates, but like we all need something different in different
Right.
parts.
And as you evolve,
Mhm.
then you go a little bit higher into, a different type of therapy that, like for me, I did EMDR probably 5 years ago, but I wasn't there spiritually, emotionally, mentally. Like, is this, what is this, kind of thing. But now it's a different story, you know? You have to be in a place where you're ready to accept a certain type of modality.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell me a little bit more of like how you help your clients, how you work with them, maybe what a typical client is like.
Okay. So I mainly work with women 45 and older who are either they had given up their careers, not given up, but they had decided to raise a family and focus on their children. And through the process of doing that, maybe they were still working, but kind of holding themselves back because they wanted to be there for their family, their spouses or whatever or their significant other. And then through this maybe 20 to 25-year process, they lost their identity. They're like, who am I now that my children are grown and out of the nest? And what purpose do I serve anymore? And maybe this woman has been so selfless in her care for others that she hasn't cared for herself. And her beliefs may be that I'm too old to start something new, or I'm too old to advance in my career, I'm too old to do this, that, and the other. But that's societal conditioning. That has nothing to do with your abilities. I would say no. Now that you're 45, 50 years old, you've got the wisdom of all of the ages. It's time to apply that wisdom and that those experiences to do greater things for others, if that's, if you have that service mindset, but also self-care is not selfish. And so programming that belief. And so, and I do this I take a holistic approach to wellness. It's not just about releasing trapped emotions is one of the things I do, or identifying subconscious beliefs that lead to self-sabotaging behavior. Because at the core, yes, you've got to get to that. But then also there are lifestyle and nutrition things that you have to do for longevity, for cognition, just for to have a good health span, not just a long lifespan, because who wants to spend the last 10 to 20 years of their lives declining cognitively, physically, and even and that leads to spiritual and emotional decline as well. Um, no, I'm thinking like I want to get my clients to, age 100 and then they just pass away peacefully in their bed without any kind of chronic issues that they're dealing with.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, it's a great way to describe kind of that holistic approach of like there's emotions in there, there's a physical part I'm hearing in there, there's spiritual, right? We're looking at the all of the wellness aspects in someone's life because if you leave one out, there's going to be an imbalance and it's probably going to like pop up in some other way. It's kind of like that game whack-a-mole where it's like
Yes.
you whack one and then something comes up somewhere else and like that's what when you don't look at the whole perspective, that's what happens.
Exactly. So I know your approach is probably pretty similar, but what is your typical client that you
Yeah,
work
I
with?
mean, there's definitely some overlap because
Hmm.
I've had a number of clients come to me where they're in a life transition. Um, they're trying to figure out who they are, what's next, and sometimes that's like maybe a young adult, but oftentimes it's people who have given so much to other people. So a lot of moms, a lot of mothers, women who just, I think women are socialized to take care of everyone else but themselves.
Yeah.
And so when you do that, it takes a toll on yourself. I mean, people look at you as like you're such a kind and compassionate and loving person, and that's true for these people, but they're abandoning themselves, right?
Right.
And such a cost to themselves. And so my goal is to help them one figure out who they are if they've lost that
Hmm.
and start to trust themselves like that they have an inner knowing and intuition and they can trust that they know how they're feeling and what's best for them that they don't need to look to external
Right.
people and in the world to tell them who they can be and that they have a right to live a life that they want like
Hmm.
there's so many people that come to me and like well I want to wear this thing or I want to do
Yeah.
this job or I want to have this relationship, but what will people think? And this is going to be different than how people
Yeah.
know me, but like what an amazing thing to finally step into your true self. And there's such a freedom and there's such a like an expansion that happens.
Well, and the world needs that expansion within each that's like in each of us,
Mhm. Yeah.
because as we thrive ourselves, then we do send out this energetic field, and other people are magnetized to it, and they want to do what you're doing, and they want to feel how you're feeling. One of the things I want to go back to what you said earlier is about how you always had this intuition, like even as a young child. And so I had that intuition as well, but I quashed mine because of, circumstances around me and the things that I perceived. How did you stay in touch with that? And how do you teach your clients or guide your clients to tap into that intuitive knowing?
I think in some ways I stay attached to it, but in other ways, similar to you, I kind of numbed it, stuffed it aside, or I didn't understand it. I just
Right.
felt kind of odd or like not like everyone else. And I couldn't really name it. And as I got older, I was like, well, maybe it's because of like the fact that I'm queer. And then maybe it's because of my gender. But then I realized like a lot of it also was to do with my intuition. Like I just could sense things that other people couldn't sense. And so I think there's a real like an acceptance piece for people of coming back and saying, no, this is who I am. I am intuitive. I have these gifts. And it's okay. It doesn't make me weird. Other people might think that, but it doesn't make me weird, and that's okay. And then I think it comes down to a practice and a
Hmm.
trust. Like, I building up these gifts that I've had, it didn't just like happen overnight. I didn't be like, oh, I have these gifts and now bam, here they are. I had to practice daily of like opening up my soul's records and like getting messages and understanding how messages come through. Like I see images or I hear words, and staying in touch with my body. That's the biggest
Hmm.
thing. If I'm disconnected from my body, which I was for so long, that really disconnects you from your intuition.
Yeah, that is so true. So very true. So, what would be an example of somebody being disconnected from their body? Is it just in in my world, it's, symptoms arise because that's your body telling you something, it's talking to you. So how do we get to the root cause of those symptoms um, through, just different awarenesses, but also again, lifestyle, nutrition, what your thoughts are, how you're thinking, what your beliefs are, and what your habits are. So, how do you help people make that mind body connection again?
Yeah, well, I think kind of the first step, like you're naming, is like noticing what's telling you that something's off. So
Hmm.
sometimes when I first work with people, there are people that are so disconnected that when I have them, I have this exercise that I do that they draw an outline of a person and they color in where they feel certain emotions in their body. And that's usually pretty telling. So people that are really disconnected from their body color all in their head. It's all about thoughts. And so
Interesting.
that lets me know that they're kind of not dropping down into their body. And that can happen for so many reasons, usually trauma related, some
Hmm.
type of discomfort, of being in the body, um, and like a way that maybe someone has learned to survive. And so as they start to pick up on body sensations, that tells you how you're feeling, if you're hungry, if you're thirsty. Physical illness, like you named, is such a common example
Hmm.
of us not being in balance and connected in with ourselves. Our body will speak. And if we're not
Yes.
listening, it will just get louder and louder and louder. And as we tune into our body, then we know what we need, and that can really guide us.
Yeah, that is so important and so very true. So, what else would you, how else do you work with your clients, or is that just like the main thing, or what kind of struggles or challenges do people come to you with?
Um, Yeah, I would say the biggest thing is people going from a place of feeling disempowered, not good enough, like perfectionism, high standards, a lot of shame, not speaking up for themselves, not knowing who they are, to a place of empowerment and inner peace and inner wisdom and trusting themselves and connection to themselves, connection to other people, connection to something larger than themselves. That's really like the spiritual piece that really helps people grow. And so I do that through a number of different ways. So some life coaching stuff that I've taken from my therapy background. Things like parts work or inner child work. We all have these parts
Hmm.
of ourselves. Some carry emotional burdens and vulnerabilities and wounds that we've experienced. Other parts are there to protect us and have been created for survival, but they can often lead to issues down the road. Um, I bring in spirit guides, angels, loved ones to give messages and kind of guide us in this process. So there's a concrete life coaching part, everyday kind of tools and stuff like that. And then the spiritual wisdom. So it's not just me, it's like a whole spirit team. Because I'm
Yes,
not healing people, I'm not fixing them. They're healing themselves. I'm just a
exactly.
channel, I'm just a guide to help them on their journey.
That is, I love that. I love that. You do take that holistic approach as well.
Mhm.
Um, and I love that you can channel that energy to help people um, feel better, do better, and look at themselves differently. So, 'cause again, it all goes back to the subconscious beliefs. One of my earliest memories, when I start kind of unpacking like why it is that I don't feel like I have a voice or that what I say matters, my earliest memory of a child of childhood was, I think I was around 3 or 4 years old, and I was in my dad had told me to go to my room and play or whatever, um, and so but I we were in this tiny apartment, my mom, dad, and I. And I could hear my mom crying because it was just right outside my bedroom door. And I went out and my mom and dad were on the couch and I think he had his arm around her and she was crying. And I said, what's wrong with mommy? And my dad like yelled so loud. He said, Michelle Renee, get back into your room. And so I think what I learned from that experience, it was traumatic to me because I was showing compassion and love and concern for my mom. And I got in trouble for being compassionate, loving, and concerned. And that was the first of many times where I'd get in trouble for inquiring or asking a question. So I just learned to shut my voice down, you know?
Yeah.
And a
That's a
lot of
really great
people won't
example.
make that connection, like from
Mhm.
being a 3-year-old, your first memory to why it is that um, they're not being who they are now because they were programmed at an early age.
Yeah. I mean, that's just like a really great example of what happens that we don't realize, like you're saying, that wound and how that's showing up today and relationally, connection to ourselves, emotionally, physically, all these things, spiritually. And then once we make that connection, we can go back to that younger version and
Mhm.
be that parent that our parents weren't able to be for whatever reason at that time, that we can show up and really caretake that version and show that version of ourselves love and compassion
Right.
and heal those all of the beliefs that were created at that time, right? So much was created in that moment, in that one memory, and that just kind of branches out. And so I imagine that some of the work that you do is like looking at some of those beliefs
Yes.
and like those codes that have been programmed in us.
Exactly. And even it's just like the little things that like maybe mom or dad said to you. And I believe my parents absolutely did the best
Mm-hmm.
that they knew how. And it almost sounds patronizing. Like I wouldn't say that to my to my mom and dad now, like you did the best with what you could. But we as humans and as like I know as a mom, like I did everything in my power to protect my children, or to to guide them in the best direction I knew how. But now looking back, I mean, I can laugh with my girls. They're like, remember when you made us be a vegan? And I was like, yes. And like it was coming from this place of love and this place of like I wanted the best for them, but then realizing down the line that maybe that wasn't the best thing for them at that time. But so going back to our parents did the best that they could, but maybe not, it wasn't the best for us, so
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, and I do think that's true. And I've had some really like deep kind of healing conversations with my parents of and they've named that. They're like, I really thought that I was doing what was right in that
Yes.
moment. I really did my best. And had I known like what I know now, like I would have handled that so differently, and I think about that as I get ready in the near future, hopefully to become a parent of like, I will probably make mistakes.
Yeah.
And it's you do your best, and the more healing that you do on yourself, it has such a ripple effect, which is like a huge part of why I do what I do, because I have this belief of the kindest things we can do for ourselves and the world is to work on ourselves,
Right.
because then we'll be responding from a more healed place and a compassionate place and loving place than from a wounded place. I think violence and hatred and discrimination and harm often comes from wounded places.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you've heard the cliche, or not cliche, but the quote, hurt people hurt people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so that's a perfect example right there, of what you're talking about. So yeah, for sure. What do you think helps people truly sustain their healing or growth long term?
Yeah, yeah.
It's kind
That's
of
a
like
great question.
what we've
And,
been
I, and I,
talking about.
I'll be definitely curious to hear what you have to say too, because, especially in the work that I do now as a coach, is a little bit different than therapy. I think people understand with therapy, you come and you spend some time there, and that's kind
Mhm.
of an assumption. In the work that I do, especially like Akashic record readings and angel stuff and intuitive messaging and mediumship, I think people see it as like a one time I come, I get some information for myself in the future, and then I go about my way. And like that can be really powerful. And there's so much that can happen in a session. However, we have these, if we think of these systems that have been programmed, belief systems, and how we look at ourselves and the world and emotions, it's like a GPS, right? And
Hmm.
if we have been programmed in a way like this is always our destination because this is where our belief systems are headed, one session isn't going to change that course. It's just going to, we're going to try to make changes, but then it's going to recalculate back to that.
Exactly.
So we have to make sustainable change, and that looks like regular work. And people can do that on their own outside of sessions, and that's great. But most people need the accountability, they need the
Hmm.
guide, they need to really be implementing changes and not just behavioral stuff, but on a deeper level, the deeper healing, changing those
Right.
programs so that they don't have to try so hard to keep going in another direction. It just, at some point, the destination changes and now you're on a new path.
Yeah, and so one of the things I meant to touch on earlier when you were talking about that, like that whole and just now reprogramming yourself, it's also about forgiving yourself for your mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how many times do we just look back in the past and go, "Oh my God, I can't believe I did that," or "I wish I would have done that differently if I had not done this and this wouldn't have happened." But you got to forgive yourself because I believe that everything happens for a reason. There are no coincidences. And even in the your worst decision processes or your worst, like moments, there are things to be learned from that and not, not continue to ruminate on those past quote unquote perceived failures because those always lead you in the right direction. And when you were talking about inner child work, I had done some of that as well. And I went back and I visited that 3 or 4 year old little girl saying, you know what? You are a compassionate, caring, loving person, and this is how your life has been. So thank you for keeping me safe. I go back to that teenage child who was making all these really dumb decisions, that could have resulted in some really bad outcomes.
Yeah.
And I thank her for, who she was and what she was trying to do, because look at where we are now. And I believe that every part of our childhood remains with us and it can remain with us in a positive fashion. And, if you have these thoughts, like, God, that was so dumb that I said that, go back to yourself at that age and say, you know what? Because you said that, you create an awareness around something else that led to really great things. I mean, whatever that looks like.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Like I love that you bring up that there's right different ages of younger
mhm.
parts. I think people think, well, inner child is just one age, but no, and they need
Mm-mm.
different things. My younger self that's like 5 or 6 is very prominent, and she needs something different than my adolescent self, teenager self, than my college self, right? They all need different things. Um, and we need to spend time with them. And that self-forgiveness is huge. That's something that, and I'm sure you see it in the work that you do, that my clients struggle with a lot. I mean, I've struggled with that myself. Like, how do we forgive ourselves for things, especially for compassionate people, things that have led to harming other people or harming
Right,
ourselves? But we've learned so many things. And of course, we're human. We're going to make mistakes. But if
right,
we can't forgive ourselves, then we stay in this guilt and shame pattern, and it often just hurts us in the end.
right. Well, and the things that used to keep us safe, the emotions, the behaviors, and things like that, our subconscious is really trying to keep us safe. That's its goal, to keep us alive, right?
Mhm.
But the things that used to be safe as we evolve into adulthood, um, are no longer safe anymore. They're actually holding us back. Those safety zones aren't safe for a lot of us. And identifying what our perceived safety zone is and reframing it, um, and recalculating, let's reset the GPS on this, and recalculate our route, is so important for just having a beautiful, joyous life of service and of love for self and to others.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It may sound a little woo-woo, but I experienced it 1000% in my life. And when I finally looked in the mirror in 2019 and said, I don't like what I see, and I know I have complete control over myself. I may not be able to control my external things, but I can control at least what I think, how I react, how I respond, and what I do in my life. And once I had that recognition and I made those changes, I mean, it wasn't overnight, but it was like, creating awareness around what it was that I was doing to elicit certain responses or certain outcomes in my life, things changed and the people around me changed because I had changed. It's
Yeah.
that ripple effect.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that kind of describing of like a moment in time that like really kind of shifted things.
Hmm.
Because like what I'm thinking of for myself is like I remember standing in my therapist's office and just being like, I feel like no one really knows me. Like I feel like I'm well liked, but
Hmm.
like, do they actually know me? And if they did, would they still like me? And do they actually like me? Because they don't know me, right? Like I had this like really like moment where I was like,
Yes.
how do I change that? Because I'm totally in control of that. If people don't know me, it's because I'm not sharing parts of myself because I'm scared. And do I even like myself? So I had to like go on a self-acceptance journey to then start to feel, safer and more comfortable putting myself out there. And then, like you're saying, the ripple effects. People who have been in my life for a decade or two have kind of said like you've changed so much.
Yeah.
You interact with us differently. I know you better. You're way more like emotionally available and vulnerable. And it's created such deeper relationships. So it shows like if we just work on ourselves, like we can also change our relationships, even if that other person isn't, you know, on that path with us. It's going to force them to change in some way.
Right. And not force like force, but you empower. And I don't love the word empower because I feel like that communicates something like that you get your power from other people. But whenever you change for the positive, then people rise up. It's that a rising tide lifts all boats. And so if we are that rising tide, we want to lift up the people around us. And in that process, unfortunately, not unfortunately, but a lot of times relationships change, friendships change, and the people around us start to change if they're not rising with us, you know?
Yeah.
But I look at that as a blessing because that person or that group of people or those experiences served us in a season, but maybe, and it's not like you like get rid of your friends, but sometimes the friendships change
Yeah,
and the
it's no longer
relationships change.
no
Yeah.
longer aligned. And that's a fear that I often hear from clients. And I've heard for many years in therapy of
Yeah.
like, okay, well, what if I change and then my partner or my friends or family, like, what if like I don't want to be with them anymore? What if the relationship no longer makes sense? And how I've always answered that is by the time you reach that point, if it really isn't aligned, you're going to find it a lot easier to walk away. Not saying it's not going to be painful and you're not going to feel sad,
Right.
but you'll be in a place where there's such a gap and it feels so uncomfortable actually to keep the
Hmm.
relationship because it's so not aligned that you'll know when it's time to part ways. But I always encourage my clients to lovingly invite people in their life along with them for the journey of saying, I'm
Yes.
going on this journey. I would love for you to come along, like whatever that means. Um,
Right. You don't actually have to verbalize it that way, but.
yeah, like
Yeah.
I want
I hear
to
what you're
work
saying.
on changing how my relationship with food, or I want to, explore my spirituality or whatever it is, right? And say this is what I'm doing because it's important to me and I'd love to share this with you. And the person will grow with you or they won't. And then you'll feel that disconnect and you'll know when it's time to either part ways or continue with that relationship.
Well, and essentially what that is, I agree 100%. Essentially what that is setting boundaries.
Hmm.
And sometimes setting boundaries with people you haven't set boundaries with before is very uncomfortable and very like, whoa, 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 wait a second. And so, but that's another part of the coaching process that I'm sure that you do as well, is training or guiding my clients on setting boundaries that are good for you and that is not a selfish act. It's actually one of the best things you can do for yourself and for others involved. Because when you don't set boundaries personally, emotionally, um, physically, whatever, then that just you become what's the quote? It's like if you don't set boundaries for yourself, then the world will set them for you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know,
Yeah.
and you don't want that happening.
Yeah, and if you don't set boundaries, the world walks all over you.
Yeah,
Another
exactly.
area of specialty is anger. Like I work a lot with anger and guilt.
Yes.
They're like two sides of the same coin. Anger is someone's harming me, guilt is I'm harming someone. And
Hmm.
so anger really gives us the signal and the drive to protect ourselves. So it's really there and it's important for a reason. And if we don't have boundaries, then we often, what I see with clients who don't express anger is more depression, low self
Hmm.
worth, self esteem, difficulty asserting their needs, more physical health issues. People often think that having too much anger is a problem, which it can be, but not having enough can also be a problem. So boundaries are so important, especially as in your healing journey. And as you're saying, when you haven't set boundaries and you're starting to set boundaries, people often in their lives will be like, what's going on? They might not say that, but they might be
Right.
like, you're acting different, or I feel like you're really sensitive, or you're
Mhm.
overreacting. And it's just because the dynamics are changing.
Yeah, exactly. And it's uncomfortable for them. And it's not comfortable for you necessarily when you're learning how to do it, but if you're doing it for yourself, it's for the greater good, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And that's why a lot of people come to see us is because they want to move up, and change, but they just don't know how to do it on their own. And like you said, the accountability piece is so important. Like, like you said, that you go to a therapist, maybe you have 10 sessions with a therapist, and and so a start and end. But this journey that you and I walk with our clients on is really ever evolving, and it never quits, because once you there's a quote that says that your current comfort zone used to be your growth zone. So whenever you want to move into the next growth zone, you got to move out of that comfort zone. And that, in my opinion, is something that you want to be happening until the day you take your last breath, you know?
Yeah,
So,
the healing and the growth is always evolving. And
yes.
something that I sometimes directly tell my clients is like, my goal is that you don't need me anymore, right? That
Yeah.
you have the tools and the inner wisdom. Like, I don't want you to feel like, well, I have to go ask Sam because like I don't know what to do in this situation. Like, I want you over time to start to, and I see this with clients. They're like, I had the situation and I was like, I wonder what Sam would say. Sometimes they kind of internalize my
Yeah.
voice as like a helpful part of themselves, which is really their own inner knowing, or they share with me how they handled something beautifully, and it's like, great, like you have the tools, run with it. Not that you can't come back and see me now and again, but like once there's a real confidence of like, life isn't going to stop being hard, we're not going to
Hmm.
stop having problems, we're not going to stop growing, but do we have the tools and can we trust ourselves to move forward? So I'm wondering for you, like, how do you know with your clients when you're like ready to be like, I think you're good, I think you got this?
Yeah, it's time to push you out of the nest now. Well, we start off initially with like, what are your three top priorities right now, and how do you see these playing out in your life? And so we'll address like the top three priorities. And then so over time, it depending on the client and depending on how deep in the hole they perceive they are. There's some people that come to me, they're like, I know a lot of this whole, I know a lot of this stuff. I just want to move up to the next level. So we have like a 0 to 10, like on a scale of 0 to 10, how are you in this area? And so we will gauge that over the period of our sessions to see and I can see, progress that a lot of times the clients can't see. And so, and there again, it's like, what would Michelle say? What would Michelle tell me to do? And I remember specifically, to your point, when I was working with the therapist, and it's almost like and she was a spiritual guide that I still keep in touch with. And but I remember thinking like, how would Jen handle this? Like, or what would Jen tell me to do? And I would text her and be like, this is what I was thinking, and blah, blah, this is what I was, and she's like, you responded beautifully. Like and so I realized at that point, I'm like, I don't need I love Jen. I don't need Jen to help me make these decisions, because it was and specifically setting boundaries with my mom, who had been no contact with for like 9 months. And then I was like, I got this, like I can do this. And she gave me some great tools, you know. So I don't need the therapy anymore, kind of thing. But I'm continuing on my own personal growth journey, which is constantly learning and figuring things out for myself, you know,
Yeah.
based on tools that I provide for my clients. So that's kind of a long answer to your question. It really is, it's not so much objective, but a lot of times very subjective, you know?
Mhm. Yeah, you really make that decision with the client of like, do you feel like
Mhm.
you're ready or where you're at or the progress? And when you're talking about these kind of goals or things that you're setting, is that kind of you're bringing in the holistic thing of like what's
Yeah.
an example of some goals that someone might set or work on?
Well, a lot of times people come to me and women come to me because they are going through menopause, or they, or they're postmenopausal and they're like, I've got all this weight, I've got this brain fog, I have this low energy. So initially we will start with, a health plan, like a nutrition, lifestyle, sleep, hydration, supplementation kind of framework. But a lot of times, and what I find is that it's too hard for them to stick to it. Well, why is it too hard for you to stick to it? There's some energetic imbalances. There's some subconscious programming that makes them believe that I'm too old to lose this weight. Menopause is, I mean, this is just part of getting older, and this is what happens. And I tell them like, listen, when I was 52. I got on stage in front of 500 people in a bikini, and I had trained for a bikini competition, and I actually got third place. And the medal was like great, but the journey of getting there was like the biggest prize. And the things I learned about myself and the things that I learned about my beliefs were about getting older and, um, gaining muscle and losing body fat and getting up and basically in front of all these people, being recorded and all this stuff in 6-inch heels with next to nothing on with my family, my friends out in the audience supporting me, that gave me like it took some courage to do that, but it also took a huge commitment to get to down that path. But ultimately what that showed me is that you're never too old to make a significant change in your life and to achieve the dream, whether it be the body, the confidence, whatever that you once had, you know?
Yeah, I love that story. And I can imagine that there was probably so many times that you could have just quit. Like I
Yeah.
can imagine there's so many barriers or like I can't do this or this will never happen. Or I imagine there's so many belief systems. So yeah, I see it like kind of what you're talking about is like getting to that point of being on stage, there was so much growth, right? Like it,
Yes.
it wasn't just like one aspect of it. I could see where there were so many probably parts of your life that changed, probably so many parts of you that changed just to be able to get to that point and be on stage.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and so back to the whole accountability thing, like I paid for a coach, to get me to this point. And and I had that accountability, but I also had the financial incentive to to actually complete the thing. And that was one of the things on the lower end of the list. This is really, that whole thing was for me. But my point is that sometimes it's important to have that accountability and have that somebody that you have financially invested in, to get you to that point that you want to be.
Yeah. And it's someone that's not like a close friend or family member or partner, right? Someone who is more
Exactly.
objective,
Hmm.
someone that you can really be vulnerable with because you're not like, oh no, what is this going to mean for our relationship? And this
Hmm.
person's going to think of me. I mean, not that we don't have fears of judgment of
Yeah,
anyone really. Like even I've had so many clients that are like scared to tell me things and they know they're like, I know you won't judge me, but still like I'm scared to say
I
this.
know.
But it is helpful to have someone else there with you that is in that really, really close relationship in a personal sense. And like you're saying, there is a little bit of like, or a lot of accountability that comes from paying someone to like, or
Mhm.
investing in a program, right? It's really about the investment of like, I'm investing for myself because
Right.
I think that I'm worth it. And I think that's a huge barrier sometimes to people investing in these coaching packages or programs or services, because I think underneath that there can be a belief of like, well, I'm not worth it, or I should put my money into taking care of all these other people or all these other things, but I don't know about myself, or maybe I'm not ready. But people are always worth it to invest in themselves.
Yeah, because you don't know. I think that, well, one of the things I always say to my clients, and you probably heard that, like when you're standing in the frame, you can't see the big picture.
Mm-hmm.
And so to have somebody that is you're not competing with, and that literally has like your best interest at heart, that's why we're doing this, to look at the big picture so you can step out of the frame and see it with us, and this is what this looks like. And back to my competition, when I decided to do that a year before, I mean, I looked in the mirror, I was like, I don't know how this is ever going to turn into a bikini body, stage ready body, but I'm going to trust the process and I'm going to do what my coach is telling me to do on a weekly basis, and towards the end, it became like, a daily thing, daily check-ins, and it was hard. It was hard on me. It was hard on my husband. I mean, like, we couldn't take trips during this period because I'm like, no, I have to eat this certain thing. I have to do this certain thing. Or we wouldn't go out to dinner with friends and all. And so he made the sacrifices as well, on a different level, but it was worth it all in the end, and having that accountability. So if I would have looked at myself and said, it's going to take a year to get to that, a lot of people would give up.
Mm-hmm.
So that's again why it's important to have somebody that's in it with you and wants the best for you even more than you do at that point, a lot of times, um, to guide you along the process. So if I had not had somebody that was rooting for me and guiding me along the process, I would have looked at myself and said, "There's no way that I could do that."
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah, and someone that has done that journey with many people, right? Like once
mhm,
you've worked with enough people, like when someone comes in with certain issues, or they're like, I don't know, I can do this. You're like, but I've seen this.
yeah,
I know
yeah,
that this is possible. Like you hold that hope and that belief
right,
so that person can believe it in themselves. And then you set up in small steps, right? We're not asking you to get from there to
right,
there in 6 days. It's like this is going to take time. And that it's really about celebrating all along the way. It's easy to just keep being like one goal to the next and put your head down. And it's always about healing. But it's like what's really helpful to have someone else is to take a step back. And like you were naming, like sometimes we see the progress, but
right,
clients don't. And so I love celebrating that with them of like, do you like, let's just pause. Like, do you just
yeah,
realize like what you just said? Like, that's
right.
huge. Like, a month ago, 2 months ago, 6 months ago, like you never would have said that. You never would have done that. That boundary that you set, like
Hmm.
that's amazing, right? And like it can be so small, but it can be so big.
Yeah. And it's the small things that, little by little, a little becomes a lot, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but we live in this microwave society where we want everything yesterday.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
and we want to close our eyes and, like you said, work out for 6 days or do something for 6 days and, see this great transformation. Well, that's not realistic, especially when you're doing it in a healthy way and peeling back the onion, layer by layer. Ripping off the Band-Aid, is not always the greatest approach to personal growth and this journey that we're on. So,
Yeah. I always like using this kind of metaphor of cleaning out your closet. It's
hmm,
like all of our wounds and our belief systems and everything that we've been through has been shoved away in a closet. And when you start to go and work with someone and work on yourself, it's like opening the closet sometimes for the first time. You don't know what you're going to find. Or there's going to
right,
be things that you forgot about that are shoved in the dark corners. And you can't just take that all out. Like you're going to reorganize it, right? Like, what do I don't need anymore? Like, it just doesn't serve me. It's outdated. What do I want to keep because it's actually really helpful? What do I
right,
want to add to this because I think it'd be even better? And so that organization, when you take everything out of the closet, the room's a mess and it's going to feel sometimes harder and more messy at first. And people are like, is this helping? It's like, yes, you just got to trust the process because it's going to be uncomfortable. But as you start to reorganize things and put things back, like at the end of the process, your closet is going to be, it's going to be a good fit for you and what you need and organize in a great way. But in the in between, it's hard, you know, and it feels
Yeah.
like, is this making any sense? Am I actually getting better?
Right. Well, and I like what you were saying is like when you're cleaning out that closet, there are some things that you're like, well, I got to get rid of this because it's not serving me anymore. I think a good practice with those things that are not serving me anymore is to thank you. Thank you for being here for me and getting me this far. And I'm really grateful for you, but I don't need you anymore, kind of thing. And just thanking that thing, whatever it was, that anger, that frustration, whatever that thing was, or that experience or that memory, just thanking it for getting you to where you are now. But it's time for me to leave you now.
Yeah, that's a really important. Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up because we don't want to shove things away. You know, we're
Mhm.
not trying to shame these parts
Exactly.
away. We want to
Exactly.
say thank you, but lovingly let them go when we need to
Yes.
release them.
Yes. I love that. So,
Yeah. Well, I'm wondering, like, um, what has helped you as you know, as your coach and helping other people, what helps you kind of stay grounded in your own wellness and your own healing journey? How do you take care of yourself?
I think one of the most important things is continually learning more
Mhm.
and researching and hearing from other experts that are, ahead of where I am. Because there's always going to be somebody one or two steps ahead of you.
Mhm.
Um, Keeping an open mind. I used to be so closed-minded. This is the way you have to do it. This is the only way to do it. You have to be a vegan. You have to be a vegetarian. You have to be, whatever. Religion. You have to believe in this one thing or you're going to go to hell, kind of thing. It's just really opening up your mind to new ideas, and being curious about them. So I think those are two huge things for me. Um, because I know when I was so rigid, God, I was rigid with myself and I had such high expectations for myself. Well, that, permeates out into the world and like you can't I would be a hard person to be around. So not being ri rigid in my thinking anymore. But like some of the practical things I do is I make sure that I exercise every day. I have like 4 or 5 days a week where I'm lifting and a couple of other days where I'm doing some cardio or some kind of like, cardiovascular work. Making sure I eat clean because I know that whenever I don't eat clean, I know how I feel. Because I'm at a certain level in the way I eat, like 99% of the time, that 1% can throw me off for a couple of days. So I have to decide, like, do I really want that piece of cake? Well, yes, I do because it's my 55th birthday, or it's it's a great celebration with my family. But also realizing that I'm going to have to do some things to kind of like detox myself from that. Um, so those are some main things. But I just really think that the most important thing is staying strong and fit. That's not the most important thing. Staying strong and fit physically and mentally.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, yeah. You know, you bring up a good point that sometimes I think it can be some people can get into kind of a perfectionistic mindset over
yes.
healing of like I have to do it just this way. I see that in spiritual practices too of like I
Hmm.
have to do this ritual the exact way and I have to do it every morning and I think when healing stuff becomes like that, it starts to not serve the purpose anymore because we get to be flexible. I think it's good to have routines, you know, because if we don't have any routine, then, you know, I think it's hard to move forward.
Right.
But it's good to have moments where it's like, you know what, today I would normally work out and my body's telling me I need to rest. Or
Exactly.
normally I would do this ritual around the full moon. And you know what? I think my intuition's saying I need to do it a little differently.
Hmm.
And I think it's so important to listen to ourselves. And that's something that I've had to learn for myself because I've kind of had that tendency. I've also had like you kind of like a rigid thinking or high expectations.
Hmm.
And I've seen how that has bled into my relationships, even like early on in my therapy career, of like, it wasn't helping with the work that I was doing with my clients. Once I was
Right.
able to, you know, not say like go with the flow because I can't do that, but more like lower, have realistic expectations, have more
Hmm.
self-compassion, then my compassion for my clients just continued to grow. And I was able to kind of help them infuse that in themselves.
Yeah. Well, and it goes back also to self-forgiveness. Like, okay, so I missed my workout today. It's not going to like, I'm not going to lose all my muscle mass, or I'm not going to like, um, it's doesn't mean I'm going to be unhealthy tomorrow, but it's that self-forgiveness and like, you're always only just one choice away from making a better decision, right?
Mm-hmm.
One decision away from making better choices. How about that? That sounds better. I was like, that sounds weird, but yeah. So how do you incorporate it in your own life to make sure that you are, staying healthy, mentally, bodily, and spiritually?
Yeah, all the things. I learned this kind of perspective, if you will, concept from a spiritual mentor of mine, where you have like these five key areas of your life, and they can be anything, but what's the most important thing? And so, it's like spirituality, my health, my partner, my friends and family, and then like my purpose, creative business pursuits, that kind of like larger collective purpose. And so trying to go back and saying like, am I taking care of all these parts? Because it's so easy for me to get really focused in one, especially career, because if in this capitalist society and needing to make money,
Mhm.
you just get, and as an entrepreneur, it's so easy to like get focused on that. And then it's like my spiritual practice has fallen away. And like I haven't been working out as much, or, I haven't been resting as much. And so every once in a while I try to come back and be like, how are those areas doing? And like, what can I
Right.
do better for myself? And like, am I tending to all of these areas? And the biggest thing I think for me is like, am I listening to my body? That is still an ongoing, ever
Yes.
learning process, because early on I learned to disconnect from my body to like take care of everyone else and to just get stuff done and be hyper independent. And now I have to slow down and be like, my body's telling me something and I need to
Right.
listen.
Exactly. And our body is always talking to us. Do we have that? Like, I love what you do is help people get reconnected with that intuitive knowing of like, okay, what does this mean? You hear about people, this might be a rabbit trail, but you hear about people who like, oh, Bob, he was healthy as a horse and just one day he
Mm-hmm.
died of a heart attack. Well, no, that happened over time, um, or you hear of these things that happen over time, and so what I do is I want to take a more preventative approach, like to keep that from happening. So these trapped emotions, can lodge themselves in your body and or into um, areas of your body that are more vulnerable, and eventually what happens if they're not addressed can turn into disease, or
Yeah.
dis-ease. I mean, it can turn into a cancer or,
Mm-hmm.
heart event or whatever, or just complete dis-ease, like fibromyalgia or just a chronic pain or whatever. So addressing that at its core is so important.
Yeah. So that comes back to that holistic integrative approach. Like if we're just saying, well, I'm just eating a certain way and doing this exercise, and then so people are confused of like, why did this thing happen? Like someone died of a heart attack or something. It's possible that maybe there were other parts. Maybe there was energy blockages because they never expressed their emotions, or there
Yes,
was other stuff living inside them energetically, emotionally, and that created its own issues in the body. And I think on a societal level, I think we're starting to understand, like people are
yes,
starting to kind of buy into that. But that's, I mean, that's a huge part of what I do is like we got to look at the energy body,
yes.
not just a physical body, but the spiritual energy body, because emotions can get trapped, like you're saying, and
Mhm.
trauma and create all sorts of problems.
Well, don't you think if you address the spiritual or the energetic body first, that
Mm-hmm.
the rest kind of just falls into place?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Like, and even like mental health stuff, like anxiety and depression. Again, if we heal on an energetic, spiritual soul level, we heal at all the other levels. So if we
Yeah.
really go to the core, it's kind of like we're thinking about homeopath or functional medicine, this idea of like, let's actually go to the root and
Mhm.
see what's there and let's
Right.
heal that, and then the other stuff will be fine, versus let's fix a symptom of a larger problem. If we're just fixing the symptoms, and we're just putting a
Right.
band-aid over and
Putting a
over and over
Band-Aid on
again.
it. That's right.
Mhm.
Someday you got to rip that Band-Aid off.
Yeah, and if there's some weeds, like it doesn't make sense to
Yes.
just keep cutting them. You gotta really pull them out and get the
Yes.
roots, otherwise it's just going to keep growing back.
Right. And along that same vein, like when it comes to mindset or subconscious beliefs, you can plant any seed that you want in your brain and it will grow. It could be a weed or it can be a flower, you know.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's the ones that you tend to that tend to take over,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
um, the weeds will kill out all the good stuff, choke out all, that's a better word to say, choke out all the beauty, or whenever you go and, get the re weeds at the root, the emotions, the trapped energies at the root, and pull those out, then it gives way for the beautiful things to grow.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I love that.
So,
um,
so like, what are some of the things that packages or programs that you do with your clients, and what does that look like?
yeah, so I have like kind of the one-time sessions for people that just want to tip their toe
Mhm,
in, because I know that, unlike therapy, I think people are kind of understanding what that looks like. I think what I
mhm.
do, this intuitive life coaching, mixing in spiritual tools and gifts and wisdom with life coaching, I think people are like, what does that actually mean? What does that look like? And I can
Yeah,
explain it all day. And I think sometimes people just need to experience it.
experience it.
And then they're
Yeah.
like, oh, okay, that was so cool. And they usually get a lot of information. So I have these one-time sessions to kind of try it out. Or if
Mhm,
someone's already working with like a therapist or a coach and they want to get some kind of deeper wisdom, they can come to me for that. I also do relational and group work. So if someone's wanting to explore, like, what's my connection to this person in my life, like friend, business partner, romantic partner, and how can we work better together? Do we have past lives that we've lived together? And how does that
mhm.
impact this life? Because we're not just impacted by the wounds and experiences of this life. We can definitely carry stuff over from other lives.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so I do kind of that work. Or if people just want to share in a group experience, like for fun, those are
Yeah.
always so much fun.
Yeah.
Um, but then for the deeper work, I do offer a 3 month coaching package that people can, re-up if they want to keep doing the work. But there's so much that can happen in that three
Mhm,
month period. And we kind of look at like you were saying about your work, like what are your major goals? Like where are your major stuck points? Where would you like to be? And
mhm.
then some of it is kind of like the unfolding of it. When you do spiritual work and you kind of let kind of intuition guide you. Like
Yes.
sometimes I always ask in the beginning of a session, like, what do you want to focus on today? But I trust and I know that we'll be led wherever we need to lead.
Yes.
And so whatever needs to be dealt with at that time, we'll be focused on.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So I take the same approach with my clients. Like especially with the releasing the trapped emotions using the emotion code. Somebody will sign up for like one session to see like what is all this about.
Hmm.
So I will do it per session, and then they see and they're like, oh my gosh, like I had no idea what this was. Yes, sign me up for more, kind of thing. So I will do one-off sessions. I really believe, though it takes more than one session to really dig deep. I will do just like the holistic, or just a holistic wellness plan for somebody for, which we would meet 2 or 3 times to discuss that, and then they are kind of off on their own. That's for people who just kind of want to brush up, a little bit, and maybe they're doing their own spiritual work or their own, um, you know, they know how to be healthy. They just want to see what it looks like in a plan,
Yeah.
and see a different perspective. But my deeper work comes with the 10-week sessions, where we address the mind, body, and spirit. So we do a wellness plan as far as, health, like lifestyle and nutrition, but then we do the emotion code and we release those trapped emotions over 10 sessions. Um, we look at the subconscious programming and, and come up with a plan for that. So, yeah, it's definitely more of an investment in yourself, not only financially, but time wise.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah,
yeah,
because it's not just about what someone's doing when they're in a session with you, but what they're
right.
doing outside of it, right? So I usually always kind of like send a summary if we're working
Hmm.
together longer term of like, here's what we talked about. Here are the action items that we've talked about, like
Right.
continue to nurture your younger self,
Hmm.
or cut cords at the end of every day so that you aren't carrying all this energy from work that
Hmm.
you've carried on, and you can separate work from your personal life. So like some of those concrete things, I think spiritual work and deeper work can be very like bigger perspective. And I think that's great. But I'm also very like, well, what does that mean? What does that look
Right. On
like
a
of what
daily
you can
basis.
do?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. You got to dial it in and then you
Hmm.
can kind of look back at it. So,
Yeah.
um, okay. So what is your website or how do people get in touch with you?
Yeah. So my website is samintuitivecoach.com. And I have like all my social medias is like that. My YouTube channel, my Instagram, my TikTok, all Sam Intuitive Coach. And I'll definitely kind of link that in the description for this. And people can book a free consultation if they're just wanting to see like how I can help them, or if they want to dive right in. Like I
Yeah.
I love doing sessions. And then the latest thing that I've been starting is I'm doing a podcast. So I've been starting to record sessions. I haven't launched it yet or published it. I hope to do so soon, but people can get a 30-minute session, like an individual or relational with some other person, and they can experience what it's like to dive into their soul's records and ask questions and get guidance in their life. And then hopefully the podcast people can watch it and get some guidance for themselves. Maybe something will resonate of what someone
Yeah.
else says.
That's really cool. I'm gonna have to
Yeah.
sign up for that. That sounds awesome.
Yeah. And what
Love
about you? How
that.
do people get in touch with you?
So my website is elanvital-coaching.com. So Elan Vital is ELAN V as in Victor ITAL, and it means vital force. So it's different from empower, because it's vital force is something that you have within you.
Hmm.
You're born with it, and it just gets snubbed out sometimes. So it's time to reignite that. So elanvital-coaching.com, and then all of my social media is Elan Vital, or Elan Vital Coach. Um, Instagram, well, you can find me on LinkedIn, Michelle Ward, um, Facebook, and YouTube, Elan Vital. So.
Awesome. And anything like exciting of like what's coming next? Like what are you hoping to keep working on or incorporate more in your coaching work? Anything like that?
Yeah, so I also wanted to mention there's a free self-sabotage quiz on my website. It pops up and you can book a discovery call, complimentary discovery call for 30 minutes. So right now I'm doing a lot of this kind of stuff, talking to people, kind of getting that the word out. I will be doing a session, an emotion code session, group session on
Okay.
May 7th. I don't have the details of that quite yet, but doing it with Claudia, who has her little gathering is called Cup to Color, Cups and Color, and so she does painting. So and to try to get the emotions to come out. Well, I'm going to do the emotion code on some of her participants. And I've got a couple of things like that coming up, but I don't have any further information about that right now. So that's not very helpful.
No, that sounds really cool. Like I love the idea of like a group emotion code session. For those that maybe aren't familiar with emotion code, do you want to just give a brief description of that?
Yeah, so the emotion code is really tapping into the subconscious, to see what trapped emotions that need to be released. And so I use muscle testing, and I can do this by proxy. I can our subconscious mind has the amazing ability to set its needs aside for the needs of somebody else. So I just tap into somebody else's subconscious, either in person or by proxy with their permission. And then I'll ask questions like somebody might come with they have chronic migraine. So say, is there an underlying emotion that is creating or contributing to these migraine headaches? And so it's super interesting how you go down this rabbit hole of different emotions, and I can find out the age of when this occurred. And a lot of times the client is like, oh my gosh, yeah, that was when maybe something like vulnerability came up. Oh yeah, that was when we moved from Chicago to Texas and I didn't know anybody. Um, and you go through all these crazy emotions that are lodged into these different areas, maybe the head or the neck or whatever. And as I release them magnetically with my hand over the governing meridian, they start to the emotions just they take a different the energy doesn't go away, like the memories don't go away or whatever, but they dissolve into a neutral energy. So yeah, so it's profoundly simple, um, and profoundly like quick. Like it is amazing the things that can happen over one, two, three, and four sessions. So
Yeah, that sounds amazing. It sounds really powerful. Like you said, like very simple in some ways, but I love when there's techniques like that where they feel simple or kind of easy to do, where it doesn't involve like a whole lot of like, I have to tell my whole life story, or, you
no,
could just
not at
go in
all.
deep, you can
Yeah.
clear some stuff, and then it has a profound change. Like I've definitely seen that with like one or a few sessions with someone where I'm cutting cords from past lives or like vows that they've made in a past life or beliefs. And we're kind of doing some angel healing and energy clearing. And they're like, I feel so different. Like I just had someone recently who had a
Yeah.
session with me just one time and was like, my anxiety is almost gone. Like it's just like I don't feel anxious anymore. I feel so confident because we did some clearing of some
Yeah.
beliefs and protective parts. And it's just like amazing what can change so quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so fun to watch too. You're like, it's almost like unbelievable. Even that's still for me, I'm like, seriously? Like, you know, so somebody's pain goes from an 8 to a 2, and like after just releasing 5 or 6 emotions, and then we get it down to a 0, and I talk to him a couple of, days later, pain's still gone. Check in with them a couple of weeks later. Yep, pain's still gone. It's gone. You
Mhm.
know, I don't
Yeah,
even
you imagine
remember what
how
it felt like. Yeah.
yeah, you imagine how like powerful that would be for so many people with chronic pain.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying that it'd be like 100% better in one session, but I've seen it
Mhm.
happen. But I've also seen it happen over a period of 5 to 10 sessions because the roots are deeper in those people. There may be
Mhm.
more trauma, there may be more
Mhm.
life experiences or more perceptions that, our perceptions are our reality, but just some layers to peel back that maybe we didn't know right ahead of time. So it's hard to predict how many sessions it's going to take, but we just kind of go. But the subconscious is very smart and it remembers everything. Actually, I don't know if it's smart. It just remembers everything. And so, even if you don't remember your subconscious, you got to trust the process. The subconscious knows what it's referring to.
Yeah, the body, like that book, The Body Keeps the
The body
Score,
keeps the score.
right?
Yeah.
Like the body knows it is very wise, but also that can work in a healing way. When you heal
Mhm.
at a more like a spiritual soul or body level, it will keep those memories. And,
Yes.
even if you don't know exactly what it was about or, you're not aware of it, like the body knows.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's right. Well, I have so enjoyed our conversation,
Yeah,
and
same.
hopefully we can do it again sometime and maybe, do some sessions on each other so people can see exactly what it is that we do and see what if that resonates. So,
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to try the stuff out that
yeah,
you're naming. It sounds super cool. And I'd be so interested to see what comes up.
yeah, awesome. Well, let's make it happen.
Yeah, well, thank you. This was so much fun. If this resonated with your soul or helped you step more fully into your truth, please show some love by liking, subscribing, and sharing it with someone who might find this helpful. Your journey is sacred. Let's keep growing together.